Good Tuesday morning of the 18th week, but actually, since it's August 15th, it's the feast. It is the feast of the Assumption of our Blessed Mother. And it's one of the key feasts in the church celebrating Mary, our Blessed Mother. But it's also, from a Passionist point of view, if you don't mind me being very personal at this moment about it, it's also a very sacred day for the lives of the vast majority of Passionists, worldwide, but especially American Passionists, because it's on the 15th of August that the vast majority of us Passionists took our vows. Yeah. So it's a day of, I think it's more important than our day of ordination. I have to really think hard of what day I got ordained. I think it was, I really don't remember if it was May 29th or was it May 20th, so I don't know, 1969. But I can tell you it was August 15th, 1962 in Pittsburgh when I took my Passionist vows, myself and my classmates. It's an extremely sacred moment. And you have to understand the difference. In religious life, the vows you take are vows taken within the community for the sake of the community, and yourself, of course, as a member of a community. It's not ordination gives you your role within the broader church as a minister of the church, but your vows make you a member of the community. Here, a specific community of Passionists. See, that for me that is the key belonging. I don't think of myself as a priest. I think of myself as a Passionist. That's why whatever it is worth, when we have graduation at SLU or any major celebratory event in which you have to wear the cap and gown. I don't wear the cap and gown. I wear my habit. And I put my doctoral robe over it, my doctoral stole over it. It's just a stole like you have at Mass, okay? Your doctoral stole, okay? But the truth of the matter is I wear my habit. And the reason is I am a faculty member and a college teacher, etc., professor, as a Passionist, not just as an individual, but as a member of my community. And I am definitely not a Jesuit. And I want them to know there's a Passionist here, because I am my community. I just don't belong to it. I am it. I became it when I said my vows in 1962, August 15th, 1962 in Pittsburgh. See, that's the truth. And I thought of it, I knew this was coming, so I was thinking ahead. When I took the vows, I was what the interesting thing about it is, I was virtually certain at that time I would live a very strict monastic life. That was a Passionist life at that time, in a very strict sense. Getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to chant the Matins and Lauds, get up again at 6 to sing Prime Tierson. Silence, massive, silence all day long. The only time we could speak was that after lunch and after dinner in the rec room. We could never speak during meals. We never spoke. It was either complete silence or we had a reader that would read to us. And we took our turns being the reader. It was absolute sheer monasticism. Boy, you had to have discipline to live the life. You couldn't say, I don't feel like doing it. It was irrelevant. You lived according to the rule and the expectation. To my mind, it was identifying for me. That's my Passionist experience. And it continued throughout student life, the 8 years that followed. It lessened to some degree because in the church in the Second Vatican Council required that the religious orders revise their rules, and we became only slightly, less fully monastic. And the church changed also some of her liturgy and all that goes with it. But I have to say, since 1971, I came out here to go to school, okay? And I lived in a parish. And then in 76 to 89, I lived in our Passionist monastery and community in Louisville. And that had to be one of the finest communities I ever lived in. What a community of Passionist brothers and priests that were so committed to each other, to the outfit, apostolically and meditatively, that is, monastically. They were men of prayer. It was a wonderful, wonderful community. I expected to stay there the rest of my life. I was tenured as a full professor at Bellarmine. Bellarmine College became Bellarmine University. And One day I got a call that they were trying to recruit a new chair in the philosophy department at St. Louis University, which was my alma mater. And I chaired at Bellarmine for 9 years. And so Dr. Vincent Punza, who was the chair at St. Louis U at the time, SLU, said, why don't you apply for it? And I did, and I received the offer. 4 months later, I was recruited, and I was offered the chairmanship, and I accepted it, which means I was coming back to St. Louis, and I was coming back to the university as now one of the leaders of the university. I was chairing the department. But what made that interesting is we had a diminished passionist presence here in St. Louis. After having a very full presence for years, it diminished greatly. In fact, all we had was the retreat house up in Normandy, just north of us. And for the first time, I felt really called to do this. I'm sharing a real thought with you. It's a personal thought, because I'm thinking of August 15th. I'm thinking, in fact, it was August 18th when I came back. I asked permission of my superiors, the provincial in New York, if I could live on my own. I had no antipathy toward living in the community, or I thought it would be difficult to live in a retreat house where you're fully active all the time, and still I'm trying to do my job. And I didn't know if I could do it, because I knew I would inevitably get involved in the retreat movement at the same time as trying to do what looked to me to be a horrifically difficult job. And it was. It was all of that and more than I imagined. But I also felt a call, really a strong call, to finally assume my own life independently, where I would not be dependent on the brothers, not dependent on the community, that I would now have to assert my own life and lead it my own way. See? And I retained my relationship to St. Mark's, where I would have a ministry, but it would be a very muted and very singular ministry. See? But I really thought it was time for me to assume responsibility for my life, and I asked permission. Could I rent? Could I rent an apartment and live by myself? And they granted me that permission. See? I wouldn't have done that probably 5 years before, let alone 10 years before. But I felt, and it wasn't a rejection of monasticism at all. I had the most wonderful experience of the 13 years I was in Louisville. They were marvelous men, and it was a marvelous community. It was all that it should have been, and more besides. It wasn't that. But I felt a certain calling to assert my own independence. Learn how to cook. Learn how to take care of yourself. Don't depend on someone else any longer. And I did. And it was interesting because I learned, my father was a chef. My grandmother was a superlative cook. My mother, she couldn't boil water, and she's proud of that. And I'm more like my mother. My brother was a good cook. I didn't know how to boil water, literally. So, like my mother, I learned. And some of the meals I cooked would kill a horse. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I got half decent at it after a while. It was an experience, and I'm still living it now. 34 years I've been living on my own. And I have to say, the monastic side of me is present because I love the silence. I love being quiet by myself. As gregarious as I am as a person, I am a person who likes to be with people. At the same time, I love the solitude. That's my passionist vocation. That's it. It's a form of it. It's a form of, read Thomas Merton, it's a form of monasticism. And it's the solitary, the life of the hermit. Its foundation of actually monastic life came from the hermitage, living alone, the monks in the desert. And in some ways, that's me. In some ways, not just an analogy. But I love the silence. I love it very, very deeply. I love being quiet within myself. All right, I got Lily here too. She's my mutt, So it's a companionship, but there is the solitariness, the solitude that I find, I guess, so rewarding. I think that's what I was called to. Everything prepared me for this, to be silent and be in my own heart and be quiet. There's a great line in the Old Testament: be silent and know that I am God. And I find that's where I am now. I've learned to be silent in my home, in the quietness of my home, surrounded by all the symbols of my life, from photographs of family and friends to stuffed bears and, and deer and wolves. And it's my story. It's my story. When you come here and you sit in the living room, if you're open to listening and open to seeing, you could see that my passionate story, my life. Yeah, done my way. Thank you, Frankie Sinatra. Somebody asked me, what will you say to St. Paul of the Cross, the founder of the Passionists, when you meet him in heaven? I say to him, and he asked me, Ted, did you live the Passionist life? I'll say, Paulie, you did it your way. I got called to do it my way. But we both are Passionists.